that big launch, although it was a soft one over the weekend, could shake up the telecom sector. The 4G launch by RelGeo for the employees, and even that is 1,20,000, could be scaled up to the entire country by March. So how prepared is Relcom itself, RelGeo itself, and how prepared is the telecom sector for this competition? Sachin Gupta of Nomura joins us on the phone line, and in a bit, Sanjay Kapoor, the industry expert, former chairman of Micromax, he's already with us. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Well, Sachin, first to you, have you done channel checks? How prepared is RelGeo for the nationwide launch? Should one expect it at the end of the first calendar quarter of 2016?
Look, I think most of us have done some sort of patchy channel checks, but hasn't been a lot of detail available apart from the presentation the companies have done. So they're targeting 80%, 100% coverage by next year. We might take 1-2 years extra, but given the presentations they have made and the handset distribution they're talking about, it's very likely that some sort of launch will happen by mid next year now.
Okay, so by mid next year, some launch will happen. Sachin, hi, morning. The prices have not been disclosed yet, and that's of interest to everybody. But we understand that the low-cost 4G devices could be as low as 4,000 rupees as well. How aggressive do you think this is compared to what the others have done yet, as of now?
See, 4,000 rupees is actually not a bad starting point. And if you look at the other 4G or the TD launches we have seen in China market and even the Indonesian market, you are starting to get devices in the $70, $80 range, and they do work on multiple frequencies. So I think it's very likely that Reliance Jio can come up with devices that low. But until we actually see the exact details and the composition of the pricing plans, it is actually very difficult to be definitive on what the impact on the broader market could be. And as you've seen, the company has talked a lot about their 100 million sub-targets. The reality is, if it's not 4,000, let's say it's at 5,000 or 6,000, even if they can get 50 million customers, that's actually quite an achievement, and that can be quite disruptive for the existing guys.
Well, one finds it difficult to doubt the capacity of this group to do something disruptive, especially because the way they entered and shook the telecom market, in spite of being probably third or fourth in 2002 to launch, the ability to bring down call prices was so seminal. Do you think that it will be anything short of disruptive, Sachin?
So the voice was different. I think voice people, they only have one avenue, and you cut pricing and you get customers. See, data is actually not entirely about price cuts. Even if you look at the average customer in India, I think the biggest frustration most people have is the quality is relatively poor. Absolutely. And it's not just India. A lot of the other emerging markets, you find for data, people are actually not that price conscious. People do care about quality a lot more. And if these guys can come out to the market with decent services at affordable prices, then they can definitely be successful.
So with so much competition on the cards, how do you approach some of these stocks like Bharti and Idea? Because, Bharti, some of these telecom players are beset with problems of their own. Bharti, for example, with the Africa business, etc. But how do you approach these stocks now?
I mean, there's a price for all these things, obviously. I mean, these stocks have corrected a fair bit. And we've been bearish in Indian telcos for a long time, and we don't see any reason to change this until we get a few more details on what Reliance Jio could do. And like I said, the problem is not just Reliance Jio. If you take them out of the equation, the last 2 or 3 years actually haven't been that great. They're still, the voice price increases are very rare. Data, they are starting to, they're getting decent growth rates, but for that, the capex actually has gone up a lot. And the other problem in India remains the spectrum is limited, and every few months, every few years, we are getting more and more spectrum auctions. And a lot of these companies are heavily geared, and they've got US dollar debt as well, and the currency actually hasn't gone in their favor as well.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to you, provided the call doesn't drop, Sachin. Let me invite Sanjay Kapoor into this conversation. Mr. Kapoor, you have a fair idea of how prepared the industry is for the 4G launch. What's your sense? Is the 4G launch by RelGeo likely to be very disruptive? Are we going to see a quality and a price challenge?
I think to begin with, I have no doubt in my mind that Jio has been preparing themselves to launch a quality network. And the entire delay that has been created in their launch is because they are looking for a great consumer experience, and they have been driving their teams internally through Grapevine, that's what I pick up, to bring in network quality, which is absolutely going to give a much more superior customer experience compared to the incumbents. I think they're also a bit blessed, I would say, because incumbents have let it loose over the last 2-3 years, like Sachin said. They have really not invested enough into the networks to provide any great consumer experience. And the consumer, no matter which technology they pick up services on, has been really struggling to get quality experience in the last 2-3 years. And I think that hasn't done any good to the incumbents, because that has only enabled commoditization of services, whether it's the brand or it's the network. And therefore, probably Reliance has that softer launchpad where they don't have very high benchmarks to beat. And if they get their act together and they can bring in affordability, although my sincere wish is that I hope the prices in these markets do not fall much below the levels they are, because sustainability of the industry will become a question mark. There is no way that you can have newer technology and a great consumer experience come to the consumers with falling prices. I think the prices need to be either held or risen up over time so that we can sustain quality services. We must understand, unlike voice, data is non-linear, and it requires a lot bigger effort around the ecosystem, whether it's devices or it's content or it's access, as compared to voice. And therefore, I do believe that Reliance, on its first act of getting the network right, have put in a great deal of effort.
Okay.
I think the challenge that they will have, like everybody else has across the globe, networks are never set right at the first instance. It's a hit and trial activity everywhere in the world, and it'll take a couple of years before they can perfect it in every nook and corner. And also, they have begun with 1800 megahertz and 2.3 gigahertz. They need to hone in the 800 megahertz, which is an indoor spectrum, which is going to give them an edge going forward onto the network, and make sure carrier aggregation is there, devices support all this stuff. And the second big challenge that anybody has in this market, which is highly dominated by youngsters, is how does your brand appeal to the youngsters?
Right.
Now, that appealing to the youngsters doesn't happen overnight. It takes a concerted effort to make it happen. I think that's the true situation in the market. In the short run, I clearly see a lot of pressure on the incumbents when it comes to market share and margins. But in the longer run, I think this move will lead to consolidation.
Okay. Sachin, before we let you go, just wanted one final view on Bharti particularly, because even stripped off this Rel Jio competition, the voice revenues have been under intense pressure. You know, we've seen 5 straight quarters of a decline in voice revenues in the quarter gone by. Do you expect further pressure on financials for Bharti?
See, Bharti and Idea, they're both actually very difficult stocks to analyze given this big overhang we're talking about in the near term. On your question, I think near term, the domestic business, they actually haven't done a bad job. If you look at the margins domestically, they actually have been going up for like 6-7 quarters now. But the problem is when you're buying Bharti, you're not just buying the domestic business, you're buying the African business as well. And that has chronically underperformed since they bought the business back in 2010. And even with this spectrum, a lot of these companies have, the spectrum amortization is actually quite a complicated exercise. So I don't think we're going to see, the earnings growth will be there, but there is a scope for disappointment regardless of what Reliance Jio does, given some of these overhangs.
All right, gentlemen, completely out of time. Mr. Kapoor and Sachin, thank you very much for joining us in this conversation. So, well, competition hotting up, but it may not be a price war, it could be a quality war, because this is at the upper end of customers that the telecom companies are chasing. So let's wait and see how things pan out. We'll take a very quick break. We are coming back with our commodity experts to check how the commodity markets will perform. Our market master, Basant Maheshwari, will also be joining in a minute.